Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac is a game I've been having a hard time coming to terms with my feelings on. The original Pac-Man World 2 holds a special place in my heart, as it's one of the first video games I remember playing. My grandpa had a PlayStation 2 that I would occasionally use whenever I went to visit. My mom wasn't super thrilled at the idea of me playing his library consisting of primarily Call of Duty games, so he opted to buy me a few games of my own. This was around the time the PS2 was already on its way out, so a lot of the games that I was interested in were generally pretty cheap. I usually went for various licensed games based on whatever show I was into at the time, but every once in a while my grandpa would pick something for me if he thought it was a good deal. I guess that's what led him to picking a value pack of Pac-Man games, consisting of Pac-Man World 2, 3, and World Rally. My grandpa wasn't super well versed in games outside of COD, but he knew who Pac-Man was. Hell, I even knew who Pac-Man was, despite only being like 5 or 6 years old, so it seemed like a pretty safe bet. I mean, who doesn't love Pac-Man? Since I was still pretty new to gaming at the time, I was really bad at pretty much everything I played, so I would often rotate games pretty frequently whenever I got frustrated. Despite this, I still remember gravitating towards Pac-Man World 2 and 3 more than the other games I had. I thought World 3 was badass because Pac-Man could talk and punch things, but its repetitive beat-em-up nature was a little too much for me to truly grasp at the time, so I ended up sinking a lot more time into the comparatively simple Pac-Man World 2. Despite being a pretty generous game all things considered, I still got stuck a lot. I can remember being driven to literal tears trying to beat Clyde's machine, because that boss is still bullshit, before eventually getting hardwalled at one of the submarine levels. It wasn't until years later when I had finally awakened the gaming beast inside me that I went back and finally finished the game, and in doing so it felt like I had fallen in love with the game a second time. Being not 5 and having a fully developed frontal lobe helped me appreciate the game a lot more than I did as a kid, and it felt really nice to finally conquer all the stages that gave me so much trouble back then. While not the most groundbreaking platformer in the world, it's still an extremely solid game, more so than you might expect from a silly Pac-Man game. It's got some decent platforming challenges and a comfy vibe to it. It's also really fun to blast through. You can beat it comfortably in an afternoon, and I find myself going back to it fairly often to get that little nostalgia hit. I bring all this up to say that the original game means a lot to me, so when the remake was announced earlier this year, naturally I was pretty excited. I never played the remake of the original Pac-Man World, or the original PS1 version for that matter, so I wasn't really sure what to expect when it came to this remake. Not that it needed to do anything super crazy, all it really needed to do was be a prettier version of the game I loved and I'd be happy. Fast forward to a few weeks ago when the game finally launched, I eagerly sat down to play it, and after playing through about half the game, I realized that something felt off. Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac is not a bad game, or even a bad remake, but for whatever reason I couldn't quite connect with it the same way I did the original, which I think is odd. The game is fairly faithful to the original, offering only a few small additions in terms of new level design or content, and a lot of the changes that are here I would say are a genuine improvement over the original. So I should at the very least enjoy it as much as the original, right? The more I sit on this remake, the more something about it just doesn't sit right with me. I'm sure that nostalgia is somewhat of a factor, but I refuse to think it's the only thing putting me off considering I've enjoyed similar remakes in the past. So today, I want to take a deep dive into this game, from its various additions, changes, and everything in between, to see if I can figure out what exactly is keeping me from enjoying this game as much as the original. Both games follow the same basic setup. The 4 ghosts sneak into Pac Village one night to cause mayhem, and in the process steal 5 golden fruit from a giant tree in the center of the village. This accidentally frees an ancient demon ghost named Spooky. Spooky is dead set on conquering Pac-Land, so he enlists the help of the ghost to cause as much chaos as possible. The next morning, Pac-Man wakes up to a ransacked village and is told by the professor the legend of Pac Knight and how he used the golden fruit to steal Spooky away in the past. According to the professor, Pac-Man will need to recover the 5 golden fruits and defeat Spooky on Ghost Island in order to reseal him under the tree and save Pac-Land. From here, Pac-Man explores 6 different worlds, 5 of which house a golden fruit guarded by the ghosts. Pac-Man's moveset is pretty standard in the original game. He can jump and do a kickflip in the air to break boxes and attack enemies. The rev roll allows him to run in place and build up speed, and then launch himself in a desired direction. On top of being used to move around quickly, the rev roll can also be used to attack enemies or launch yourself off various ramps and other environmental objects. Pac-Man's last major ability is the butt bounce. By pressing the jump button in mid-air, Pac-Man will slam into the ground and bounce back up. This is mostly used to attack enemies, and it's just kind of fun to bounce around everywhere like a maniac. Every stage is a linear trek to the end, but along the way there are various fruits hidden around every corner. Each stage also has a handful of chests that can only be opened if you have the matching fruit. These don't give you anything substantial outside of marking off a checklist and increasing your score, but they're required if you want to 100% each level. Most stages also house a Galaxian that warps you to a bonus stage, which are all traditional Pac-Man mazes. As far as 3D collectathons go, this game is pretty simple. There's no unlock requirements or level gates or anything of the sort, so the only thing you need to do to progress is beat the stage, which I've always appreciated. 100%ing a level can be surprisingly difficult depending on the stage. Some of the fruits can be pretty deviously hidden, and you need to collect every Pac Dot in a stage as well, which in some levels like this skating one can be a lot harder than it looks. Thankfully, collected items and Pac Dots are saved at checkpoints, so it's manageable even in the harder stages. I like this approach because it allows the game to stay approachable while still offering a level of challenge for those who are willing to go the extra mile, a perfect balance for a simpler game like this. Re-Pac maintains this structure for the most part, but it has a fair number of additions and changes. The level design is more or less the same as the original. It's not one-to-one, but it's close enough that I didn't really notice any of the tiny differences until comparing them side by side. And there's a handful of entirely new pieces of level design too, although they are few and far between. Pac-Man has a couple of adjustments to his moveset. For one, he can do his flip kick both on the ground and in the air, which makes attacking enemies and objects feel a lot more fluid, and is really helpful for the more chaotic boss fights. The butt bounce now has an additional timing mechanic. If you do it right when this little light overlaps Pac-Man, he'll do a super butt bounce, launching him higher into the air and creating a shockwave that stuns enemies. Pac-Man is also able to throw collected Pac Dots now. You can charge it to create this little shockwave when it lands, which is a thing. I don't know, this one didn't really do much for me. The range on the attack is pretty small and doesn't home in on enemies, so its use cases are pretty limited. It's usually faster to just kick or bounce an enemy unless it otherwise requires the dot attack. The last major addition to Pac-Man's moveset is this little flutter kick that you can do to stay in the air, which while useful, definitely took a little bit to get used to. Using it stops all of your mid-air momentum, and while it can be used to help you cross certain gaps that might be too large to cross otherwise, it took me a while to get comfortable using it since it didn't really feel that good to use. I think it would feel a lot better if it was closer to Yoshi's flutter, something that might slow you down but doesn't outright kill all momentum, making it clearer how far the move can take you. As it is now though, it is pretty useful for dodging attacks and boss fights. On paper, these additions to Pac-Man's moveset are pretty neat, but in execution I find them to be pretty lackluster. Very little of the level design is changed to accommodate these new abilities, so a lot of them feel pretty superfluous. I'll touch more on this a little later though. For now, let's discuss the collectibles. Collectibles remain more or less the same from the original game. The biggest changes are that Pac Dots are no longer required for stage completion, and Galaxians no longer immediately boot you to the bonus maze when collected. You instead unlock them in an arcade machine in Pac Village, the latter of which is much better for each level's pacing. They also changed the way the power pellet works. In the original game, you'd just glow when collecting one, making you invincible and allowing you to defeat ghost enemies. In the remake, it turns you into this giant version of Pac-Man, which I'm not really a fan of personally. It's cute, don't get me wrong, but the increase in size sometimes prevents you from moving forward in a stage until the power-up wears off. So you have to just sit there and wait, which doesn't feel very natural. I think it would have been nice if there was a way to cancel the power-up early, or if it canceled on its own if there were no ghosts around to avoid little snags like this. Every level now features a set of missions you can complete for additional costumes and other goodies. These vary from beating every enemy in a stage, meeting a certain score requirement, completing a stage without falling off a ledge, or beating a boss without dying. Most stages also ask you to get a certain rank in time trial mode. A lot of them are things you'd probably do anyway while playing the stage normally, so there's only a handful that you really need to go out of your way to complete. The different costumes are also cute, so it's fun to see what costume every new world will bring. What I'm not a huge fan of are the changes to 100% completion. Re-Pac adds a new collectible in the form of figurines. Figurines can be collected and placed around Pac Village, and you can find them in fruit chests or through the new gacha machines. In the original game, you'd collect Namco tokens to unlock various legacy arcade games in Pac Village, but since those arcade games are now tied to mission rewards, the tokens are instead used in the gacha machine, to get random figures of a specific set, because that's exactly what Pac-Man World 2 was missing: gambling. This in of itself is pretty harmless, but it adds a really annoying grinding aspect to 100% of the game that I find unnecessary. There are a lot of these figures available, so at some point you're going to have to grind for a ton of tokens if you want to get everything. This would be fine if the game adjusted how many tokens were in stages, but they feel about the same as the original game. There's 250 figures in the game, and each pull costs at minimum 3 tokens, so you need a lot of them if you want to get everything. Thankfully, you can exchange duplicate figures for tokens, so the gambling aspect isn't super impactful, but at that point why not just let me buy them outright in a shop or something? If you can exchange duplicate figures for their value in tokens, which is pretty much another free pull in every instance, then the way it's structured now only serves to waste my time. Instead of just buying the figures individually, I have to keep pulling on the same machine over and over again for upwards of 10 minutes just because the game won't give me the fucking cherry. To put it in perspective, I 100%ed every stage and spent all of my tokens after each world, and by the end of the game I was only able to clear out 3 of the 10 machines you can pull from. That means that you need an insane amount of tokens if you want to collect everything. By my math, it's over 700 total. You only needed 180 tokens to get everything in the original game, meaning in Re-Pac you need to collect over 4 times that amount. So if I wanted to get all the figures for completion's sake, I'd have to sit around and grind one of the bonus mazes for eons just to get all the tokens I need, which is kinda ridiculous. There's hardly any skill involved, it's just an unnecessary time sink. It sucks because I think there could have been a way to somewhat remedy this through revamping the score system. The original game kept track of your score and showed the total on the world map screen. High scores were an already pretty outdated practice even when the original game came out, so it kind of sucks that it's more or less the same here in Re-Pac. There are a handful of missions that ask for a specific level score, but they're so low that I never had to go out of my way to try for any of them, though that may be because I was going for everything in a stage anyway. I think it would have been cool if your level score gave you some bonus tokens at certain thresholds or something. The original game gave out 2 bonus tokens in every level, one for collecting everything in it and one for completing its time trial, and I think a similar system could have been implemented here. That way there's another reason to collect things in a stage, especially Pac Dots since they're no longer required for stage completion, but still contribute to your score. The gacha stuff on its face is pretty harmless, but as someone who likes completing games like this, it feels like a slap in the face. Like the game doesn't respect my time and wants me to grind for the sake of it. Now some things I do like about the remake are the various revamped pieces of content. For example, the boss fights. The original game only had 2 types of bosses for the ghosts. Blinky has this unique frog robot, while the other 3 ghosts use a variation of the same generic machine boss, each one adding 1 or 2 unique attacks to their arsenal. You can really tell which ghost was Spooky's favorite. Each fight has the same structure. They fly around the arena attacking you, and you have to either rev roll them or bounce them on the head when they become vulnerable. The real difference between the fights are the different attacks they use, which progressively get more and more annoying. Ask anyone who's played the original game about Clyde's machine, and they'll start having PTSD flashbacks. In the remake, however, each ghost now gets their own robot, each one based on some kind of animal. Side note, it was only until writing this that I realized that some of the names of the ghosts got switched around in the remake. In the original, the red one was called Clyde, but now he's Blinky for some reason, so apologies if there's any confusion in the next section. Clyde uses the frog robot from the original game, and its fight is pretty much the same. Inky gets an owl robot, Pinky gets a polar bear, and Blinky gets a spider. These bosses are alright. They're your typical dodge attacks until the boss becomes vulnerable type stuff. The owl boss shoots its feather at you and blows gusts of wind for you to avoid. The polar bear robot shoots bombs at you, and you have to avoid the red ones and hit the green ones back at it to deal damage. The spider boss has you dodge a new hit SoundCloud single, while running around the arena pressing buttons in a specific order to unlock the path to his drum set, where you can then give him a good smack on the ass. This one's probably my favorite just because of how weird and out there it is compared to the others. I sort of wish the machine boss fight had made it in somewhere as an extra boss or something, but this is an addition I can get behind. Making every boss unique makes them a lot more memorable, much more than just spamming the same boss 3 times in a row. Another change Re-Pac makes is revamping the entirety of World 5. Originally, the Water World was a series of auto-scrollers, 2 with Pac-Man swimming and 1 submarine level. The swimming levels weren't the worst thing in the world since you could just mash the boost button to speed through them, but they still weren't what I would call particularly engaging. It also made going for all of the collectibles really annoying. The submarine level was dreadful though, mostly due to its clunky controls and insanely long length. It's like 10 minutes of only being able to see 3 feet in front of you and getting bombarded by random bullshit. It's pretty tough even nowadays. Here in Re-Pac, the swimming levels have been changed to free roam stages. Pac-Man can now swim around freely and search for items and stuff. I like how there's a bunch of different cracks and crevices to hide items in, and the way you attack enemies changes somewhat too. One of the levels has a pseudo-stealth section where you dodge giant sharks. It's neat. Way more interesting than just an auto-scroller. The submarine level is still here, but it's way shorter. You can see a lot further ahead of you now, which keeps things from feeling cheap. And you no longer have a limited set of missiles, so attacking enemies feels a lot smoother. While I do think the stage could be a tad longer, it's nice that it's not a kick in the dick like it was in the original game. That goes for the entire world, to be honest. The original World 5 felt like a massive difficulty spike for not entirely fair reasons, so it's nice that it's now more in line with what comes before and after it, without being too far removed from what they were going for in the original game. The last big thing that Re-Pac adds is a post-game. After beating Spooky and resealing him under the giant tree, a portal opens up in the tree and kidnaps Pac-Boy and Pac-Sis. Pac-Man investigates in order to rescue them and is sent back in time to where the legend of the Pac-Knight originates. This post-game consists of harder remixes of one level from each world and its boss, kinda similar to what Kirby games do with their extra game modes. While it is cool that they went out of their way to add something like this, it doesn't really do a whole lot for me, I'm gonna be honest. The first 2 levels are promising because they change how you interact with the level design, and even add substantial new level design too. The first level has its water replaced with poison that you have to platform over, while continuing the stage beyond where the original one ended. And the treetop stage adds these fans that you have to use to float yourself horizontally between platforms. It's a fun evolution of the original levels. But from the third world onward, they just stop doing stuff like this, and they just become the original level but harder, meaning they just spam hazards and enemies with shields that require more steps to kill. Credit where it's due, this part of the game did make me use stuff like the Pac-Dot throw more often, but only because the game literally forced me to with enemy types like this that are covered in poison or something, and not because it felt natural. I'm not really a fan of the boss fights in the post-game either. They're supposed to be hard mode variations, and by that they mean let's just throw a ton of bullshit at you to make it quote-unquote harder. This is fine for the ghost bosses. They're still manageable despite the abundance of hazards being thrown at you, but for the submarine boss onward it feels a little much. The second Spooky fight probably suffers from this the most. His fights in both the original game and the remake are my favorite fights in both versions. It's one of the few fights that lets you be aggressive with your attacks, and this playstyle is almost incentivized due to how fast and relentless Spooky can be with his attacks. It allows you to control the pace of the fight, which I really like. The hard mode version of Spooky's boss fight takes this angle away by splitting the giant arena into multiple floating platforms, which means you can't really be aggressive and control the fight anymore, and there's a lot more waiting around until the game allows you to hit Spooky. The underlying issue with a lot of these later boss fights can be boiled down to the same thing: their length. Pac-Man can only take 3 hits before dying, and a lot of these later bosses are pretty long and drawn out, so you're bound to take a couple of pot shots here and there, which add up after a while. This would be fine if the fights were made with that length in mind, but they really aren't. There are occasionally ways to heal mid-fight, but they're very inconsistent so you can't really rely on them, which is a problem because it's really easy to accrue damage through pot shots over the course of these longer fights. These fights also don't have any checkpoints, which I'm not sure is intentional or not. A lot of these late game bosses have multiple health bars, meaning they have multiple phases, and there's a mission in each of them to beat the boss without dying, so I would think that by default each stage would have a checkpoint. You know, to make it to where beating the whole fight in one life is something you have to try to go out of your way and do. But no, when you die it's right back to the start of the fight, which still counts against the mission objective, so you'll need to restart the stage if you want to complete it, and you'll quickly notice that doing so also gives you all of your lives back. So like, where's the challenge in beating it in one life if you're essentially rewarded for resetting at every death anyway? It's almost like they removed the checkpoints to make the boss seem harder than they actually are. I don't have any other evidence for this though, so maybe I'm just malding because it took me so long to beat some of these. These factors all compounded to making the fights more frustrating than they are hard, which is my least favorite form of difficulty balance. It just makes everything drag and not very fun after a while. That about sums it up for the gameplay stuff for the remake. While there are a few solid additions that improve the overall experience, in general, I find a lot of the changes in the remake to be superfluous. While things like the perfect bounce and Pac-Throw are neat on paper, I don't think they really go much further beyond that. I struggle to think of a point in the game where I truly felt these additions improved the baseline experience. Maybe this is just a me thing, but I feel that the super bounce got in the way more than it really helped me. Sure, the extra height you get from it is nice, and I imagine you can pull off some pretty cool skips with it in the right place, but for normal play it adds an extra step to platforming that I don't think is really necessary. It isn't like Mario's triple jump or side flip, where it feels like a natural part of Mario's moveset that you can get use out of in a variety of different situations. You only ever use the bounce to get to a platform that's barely out of reach. They don't ever do anything interesting with it. The only thing that comes close is the last section of the final boss, where you have to climb up these platforms quickly or they'll fall, but that's literally the end of the game. If there were more sections like this that required it, I could see the mechanic being more interesting, but as it stands, I find it more annoying than anything. At times, I would just have to sit on a platform for a few extra jumps if I happened to just barely miss a super bounce, which doesn't really feel that good, so I think it would have been better to have one consistent bounce height. It would make platforming feel a lot more natural and kinetic at least, like it does in the original game, wow! The Pac-Throw is the most nothing addition. It has a really short range and doesn't lock onto enemies, so its use cases are very situational. I'd be lying if I said I never used it, but it's also not lost on me that the only times I did were when the game forced me to fight an enemy that can only be killed with it, or in the super boss that was made specifically for this game. 99% of this game is made without this ability in mind, and while I don't think an ability needs to be used all the time for it to be meaningful, I can't think of many reasons you'd use this over the bounce, roll, or kick that are usually faster. A lot of changes made to the gameplay side of things feel like they were made just for the sake of having a gameplay addition you could put on the back of the box, and unfortunately, I think the same thing can be said about a lot of the game's presentation. Now just to preface, Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac is not a bad looking game. In a vacuum, the game looks quite nice. The environments are vibrant, I really like the sunset in the first treetops levels for example, and the characters are really expressive in cutscenes. On a technical level, it's mostly fine, but presentation is a lot more than strictly how the game looks. It's a combination of various factors, things like art direction, cutscene direction, music, etc., and in a lot of these areas, I think the remake falters. The original game had a particular atmosphere that I think is lost in the transition to the remake. The game wasn't afraid to be visually dark. Places like the opening FMV, treetops, and Ghost Island have a stronger atmosphere when everything is shrouded in shadow. The variety in lighting and atmosphere gave each area a unique feeling. Even though I bitched about it earlier, the murky waters of World 5 do wonders of selling a particular feeling, one of foreboding and dread as you approach the creepy Ghost Island, the final world of the game. The remake brightens up pretty much everything in the game, and I think it makes it look a little too samey as a whole. It's particularly noticeable when you compare both versions of the opening cutscene. The ghost ransacking this darker environment makes it feel like they're in a place that they don't belong. Spooky has a stronger presence in the original because he's covered in shadow during his entire introduction. It immediately paints him as a threat and something that the game wants you to take seriously. The brighter lighting of the remake version of the scene kinda hurts a lot of that punch, and it feels a lot goofier in comparison. Obviously, the original game isn't supposed to be scary. It's fucking Pac-Man, not Silent Hill. But I think the darker lighting and environments really add to the atmosphere the game is trying to go for. The best comparison I can think of at the moment is the original Luigi's Mansion. That game isn't trying to be a super scary horror game either, but it goes out of its way to create dark environments to capture a creepier vibe, despite the game's goofy ghost design and Luigi humping everything in sight. The closest Re-Pac ever gets to capturing the original game's vibe is in the post-game, where everything is tinted purple since the past is fucked up and evil, I guess. And I don't know, man, it just doesn't hit the same. All of the sauce is lost. I mean, just look at Pac-Dog, bro, he's no longer an eldritch monstrosity. Come on, guys, where's the suspense? The dread? The horror? Oh, never mind, there it is. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I prefer the mood the original game's rougher, early 2000s aesthetic invoked. Instead of trying to recapture that mood, the remake instead goes for a more sterilized, clean, cartoony look, which I think makes the game feel a lot more boring. This is most exemplified by Pac-Man himself. In Re-Pac, they added a bunch of cutscenes and voice acting for every character. The opening game had opening and ending cutscenes that were voiced, but everything else was told through dialogue boxes. Here, pretty much every interaction is animated and voiced, and that includes for Pac-Man himself. He talks in this game unlike the original. They even got the guy who voiced him in Pac-Man World 3 to voice him again, which is really cool. I like that a lot. Here's the problem though. They made Pac-Man a fucking nerd. In Pac-Man World 3, Pac-Man was portrayed as this sort of smartass. He was having none of what was happening in that game, and I think it made his interactions really endearing, especially since it was his first time being properly voiced to my knowledge. Bro just wanted to get home to his birthday party, and by God he was going to let you know that. In Re-Pac though, he's just so boring. There's no bite or anything to him. Now he's just a super generic hero guy whose every interaction boils down to, I gotta save the village. Wow, I'm such a good guy, aren't I the best? Bro is literally nice guy Pac-Man. No wonder his wife left him. Maybe it's not fair to compare him to his World 3 counterpart, but he has the same voice. Is that expectation really unfounded? Pac-Man in the original game didn't talk, but you could just tell he meant business. He had attitude. He woke up one day, the professor told him that the world was in danger and that he had to beat up some ghosts, and he was like, shit, alright, went on a rampage, and was back home in time for dinner. He was so much more Sigma than Pac Fraud over here. In all seriousness, the cutscenes in this game mostly feel like an afterthought, and I think that's mostly due to their composition. A lot of them don't have any background music, which makes them feel really awkward. Like the game tries to have this epic set piece at the end where Pac-Man turns into Super Pac-Man, but it feels so lame when there's no fanfare or anything, just ambience in the background. There's no punch to it.
Oh yeah, that hit the spot! The last lap will be mine, Spooky.
That despicable form! I'll bury you in the golden fruit for good!
Feels like they just forgot to finish the cutscene here. I don't know what they were going for. I don't think they needed to make Pac-Man exactly like his World 3 counterpart for these additions to be worth it. That's mostly personal opinion. But I can't help but feel off-put when they can go out of their way to make these expressive cutscenes for this game, but can't be bothered to do something even as simple as playing music in the background during them. It feels so half-baked. I think my biggest sticking point with Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac is that it doesn't fully know what kind of remake it wants to be. The game is both faithful to the original while also trying to revamp it into its own thing without entirely committing to either, and it makes the remake as a whole feel unfocused. It adds a lot of new features that should make an impact on how the game is played, but because it's almost too faithful to the original for a majority of its runtime, those new features don't really get a lot of use. And it sucks because I do like a lot of the changes this version makes. I like the new original boss fights for every world. I like that the Galaxian doesn't immediately boot you into a 5-minute bonus stage. I think the new World 5 levels are fun, and are overall better for the game's pacing. And I like that they bothered to add a post-game with an extra boss fight, even if I don't really care for it personally. These things improve the original experience by a decent margin, but I find that a lot of the other changes to be superfluous at best. If I had to pick a word to describe a majority of Re-Pac's gameplay additions, the first word that comes to mind is unnecessary. Hell, you've probably heard me say it a few times already. Because Re-Pac doesn't change a lot of the original game's level design in any meaningful way, it's not able to take advantage of newer additions like the Flutter Kick, Pac.Attack, or Super Bounce. While most of these additions are superfluous, neither particularly good or bad, at their worst, additions like the Super Bounce introduce a level of slight frustration to the platforming that wasn't in the original game, which is important in a game like this since that's 90% of what you'll be doing. You could argue that these mechanics add depth to the original experience, but I'm not sure if a game like this really needs that. At its core, Pac-Man World 2 was a simple early 2000s platformer, one that knew exactly what it wanted to be and excelled at it. Partially, I'd argue, by keeping things simple and easy to pick up and play. That's part of why I gravitated to it so much as a kid. Adding new stuff on top of that for, essentially, just the sake of having more mechanics doesn't necessarily ruin that appeal, but it doesn't really add a whole lot to it either. I feel the same way about the game's presentation. While the raw visuals can be nicer than the original at times, I find myself missing the vibe the original game went for. The cleaner presentation makes the game feel a lot more stale and sanitized. And with how many different 3D platformers there are nowadays that go for a similar aesthetic, I feel that it makes it a lot harder for this game to stand out visually. I like the idea of giving Pac-Man a personality again, but unfortunately I find the new cutscenes to be incredibly bland, whether that be because of Pac-Man's weaker characterization compared to World 3, or because of the cutscene presentation lacking seemingly basic components like music. With all that being said, I still think this game is a pretty decent remake. It manages to retain the core of what the original game was trying to do. While I still stand by all of my criticisms, and ultimately prefer the original game, I can also concede that they probably don't apply to the majority of people. Let's be real, it takes a special kind of person to spend close to 30 minutes dissecting the artistic integrity of a fucking Pac-Man game. While I don't connect with the remake as much as the original game, I think enough of that core experience is still here to make the game worth recommending. To people who love the original, but especially to those who haven't played it yet. In an era where games are getting more and more expensive and monetized to shit, it's nice to have a shorter, more focused experience that gives you a good amount of bang for your buck. Hell, you could do a lot worse for only $30. At the end of the day, I think it's neat that a game like Pac-Man World 2 got another chance at life to begin with. Even 5 to 10 years ago, I doubt that a simple license game like this would have been given the love and attention this game has gotten, and it's been nice to see new people fall in love with this game in the modern day. It makes me hopeful that they'll eventually revisit the Pac-Man World series and give it a new entry, though I guess they'll have to try and salvage what's left of World 3 before they can really think of something like that. But I guess we'll see. Who knows? Maybe this time, the Pac really is back.